Hello everyone. Today we're going to try to solve a few chess puzzles. They're not exactly easy, but I believe you will manage to do it. Let's get started. You might think you're winning in this position, but even if you keep giving checks non-stop, your queen is pinned and you can never move it. You might try to defend your queen, but if you do that, your opponent will just keep giving checks until he wins. First, you need to get rid of this pin. You start by moving the rook and giving a check. Then the king moves, and you give another check, but now, on this square, the rook is pinned instead of the queen, which means the queen is finally free to move. Now you can give check on c7, and when the king moves, you can no longer move the rook because it's pinned, so you can only move the queen. You can't move the king either, because if you do, your opponent will keep checking you endlessly until he wins. This is where the zigzag tactic comes in. You play queen a5, the king moves. Then queen b4, the king has to move, queen a3 again, the king moves, then queen b2. Now the king has to go to either a7 or a8, and after that, the rook can move to a3 and deliver checkmate. In the next puzzle, we have two rooks against a queen and a knight. And would you believe that white is actually better in this position? However, you need to play very carefully. If you get greedy and try to capture this knight, black will simply use the queen to pin your rook, capture it, and you'll lose the game. Instead, you should start with this check, rook to h1. The black king is forced to go to g8. Now all you need to do is keep moving your king to give checks. First, move the king to h5, giving another check. At this point, the black king must move 2 squares to the right, onto the h-file, because if it goes to the left, you can play rook to f1, and after the king moves again, you follow up with rook to e3. When the king moves once more, you simply capture the queen. Since the king moved to the right, you now move your king again to g4, delivering another check. The king goes left again. You move your king back to the right, and after that, you move the king to f2, giving check once more. Now the queen is forced to step in front of the king, which allows you to capture it. After that, there is only one remaining problem, the knight. But did you know that if you place your rook diagonally from the knight, which in this case is rook to c3, the knight cannot move? No matter where it goes, the rook will be able to capture it. From here, all you need to do is bring your king closer. And once your king is close enough, in this position on d2, you can play rook to a3, leaving black with no way to save the knight. On the next move, you capture it. After that, all that remains is to deliver checkmate with the rook and king. In this puzzle, we have two rooks against a queen and a pawn. At first glance, you might be tempted to capture this seemingly harmless pawn, but that would be a mistake because the queen can then fork your rooks and win one of them. Instead, you should start by giving a check with rook to b2. The black king is forced to move to the left. After that, rook to a8 is not checkmate because the queen is defending that square. So now you give another check with rook to c1. At this point, the idea is simple. Bring the rook from c1 onto the a-file to deliver checkmate. However, the queen controls a8 and c6, so those options do not work. If you play rook to c3, the king can simply capture the rook. The same goes for rook to c4. That means there is only one move that works, rook to c7. But what if the queen moves to a8, defending the checkmate on a7? In that case, you simply play rook to b7. Now black is in serious trouble, because white is threatening a fork that wins the queen on a7. Black is forced to move the queen to d8, but that still loses. You continue with rook to d7. Now the queen must go to b8, and at this point, white can win the queen in 3 forced moves. The sequence goes like this. First, rook to a7. The king is forced to move to the right. Then, rook to b7. The king must move right again. And now comes the fork with rook to c7. You win the queen and the game. But what if black instead plays queen to g6, giving check? First, you move your king to f8, a square where black cannot give a one-move check. Now the queen must go to g7 to defend against immediate checkmate threats. At this point, you again play rook to b7, repeating the same idea. If the queen stays on g7 to defend the checkmate on a7, you simply play rook to a5, and it is checkmate. And if the queen moves to e5, trying to defend a different square instead of a7, you simply deliver the checkmate with the other rook. I hope you enjoyed in video and I will see you in next one. Bye.